Welcome to the Town of Avon Advisory Plan Commission meeting. If you are interested in having a copy of the agenda, they are available on the tables to the right of the audience, right over there. We will be conducting business as outlined on the agenda. From time to time, the board may deviate from the agenda. As president of this body, I will inform those in attendance of any deviations. This meeting is being recorded for the public record. Because of this, we request that personal conversations are kept to a minimum and that all cell phones are set to vibrate. Any phone calls should be taken outside of the chambers. If you are interested in commenting during the public hearing portion of the Commission's deliberations, please sign up on the sheets located on the tables to the right of the audience. When your name is called, please step forward to the podium and state your name and address for the record. Please address your comments to the board and not to the staff or to the petitioner. Your comments should relate directly to the case at hand. During the conduct of the public hearing portion of the Commission's deliberations, the petitioner will have 10 minutes to present their case to the Commission. Remonstrators will have 10 minutes to present objections to the petition. Persons in support of the petition other than the petitioner will have 10 minutes to present support for the petition. And finally, the petitioner will close the public hearing portion of the presentation with a 5-minute rebuttal period. Once the public hearing is closed, no additional testimony will be heard unless it is solicited by members of the Commission during the question and answer phase of the Commission's deliberations. Subdivision plat and development plan petitions are ministerial requests, meaning that if the proposal meets the requirements set forth in the town's development ordinances, the Plan Commission must approve the request. In the interest of transparency, state law requires that the Plan Commission hold a public hearing even if the development proposal must be approved. Responses to public comments and questions may be given once the public hearing portion is closed. We do understand that there may be several persons who wish to speak. In order to keep the meeting running in a timely fashion, we would request that you not repeat previous comments. Thank you for your assistance in facilitating a respectful, fair, and timely meeting. And welcome. Please stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Call to order.
Catherine Andrew.
Here.
Sorry, for the record, Catherine Andrew.
Here.
Paul Guggenberger.
Here.
Bill Reed. Here. Greg Zusen.
Here.
Mason Pike.
Here.
Dave Kaufman.
Here.
And lastly, Jennifer Spencer.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Very good. Moving on to the approval of meeting minutes from the January 23rd meeting. Has everybody had an opportunity to read through the meeting minutes, and are there any suggested changes or edits that need to be addressed before we approve the minutes? Do I have a motion to approve?
So move.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Meeting minutes approved. We're now moving on to the public comments section. This is an opportunity for anybody in the audience to make public comments about things that are not on tonight's agenda. So if there's something you'd like to speak about that is not already on the agenda, right now is the time to come forward. There will not be a time later in the meeting when you will be able to address anything else. So does anybody have anything they'd like to speak to that is not on the agenda this evening? Okay, that being said, public comments is closed. Mr. Peoples, do we have any requests for continuances or agenda modifications?
No, we don't.
That being said, let's move on to old business.
DPR 2207 Avon Retail Center. This is a request for approval of a development plan review petition to approve a new 17,600 square foot retail center with a waiver of section 21002E of the Unified Development Ordinance to provide for a front facade with 28% glazing on the first floor, minimum 35% glazing required. Property is located directly east of the existing Beechwood Retail Center. It's zoned C2 and it's located in Tier 1 of the US 36 overlay. Short history. I'm sorry, Tier 3. Tier 3. That's a correction that needs to be made. It should be Tier 3 of the US 36 overlay. Short history here. We have earlier this year, we have a variance and a subdivision plat done on this subdivision. The variance was to allow a party wall on the existing commercial shopping center. And then the subdivision was to move the plat or the lot line to the east. This is the site. You'll show the original lot was this lot right here. Undeveloped piece of property right here. And then this is the Beechwood Center Shopping Center, Rural King, MEs, and I think this is a batting or softball facility here. The plat basically extended this lot to the west and then created this 0-foot lot line right here. The request that is coming before us today is developing a little addition on this shopping center right in this location right here. The size of it is about 17,600 square feet, and it's going to be just more tenant spaces for a multi-use or multi-tenant retail center. The shopping center is largely developed. The only thing that we really have in this shopping center is one small outlet right here, one small outlet right here, and then this right here. So with the development of this petition, you will get this shopping center largely developed. The request is consistent with the requirements of the Unified Development Ordinance at this time, with three exceptions. One, that 28% of the front facade is in glazing. That two, the building. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm thinking of a different different request. This one only has the glazing issue, and that is that the front facade is supposed to be glazed by 35% of the first floor area, and this one is only 28% as proposed. There's a waiver for that in this petition. As I said, this is located in Tier 3 of the overlay district. The majority of the facade that you'll see is oriented towards Beechwood Center Drive. The intent of the 36 overlay is to create an attractive streetscape from of US Highway 36. The proposed addition is consistent with the intent, and it does exceed the appearance of the existing shopping center that was built about 20, 25 years ago, to which it will be added. The elevation serves as an addition to an existing shopping center. The proposed addition would be more architecturally distinct than the elevations of that existing building. The request sort of splits the difference between the existing built environment out at this shopping center and the standards of the ordinance. And by split the difference, I mean only for the glazing requirements. The rest of the facade is consistent with the overlay requirements in Tier 3 of the US 36 highway overlay. This is a general layout of the building, showing you the installation of the landscaping in accordance with it and retrofitting some landscaping here. The addition of street or the street trees along Beechwood Center Road. This is the elevations. A little bit difficult to see. It's a little bit dark in the plan set, but the petitioner did submit some color elevations, and this is what the addition would look like from the two facades that are going to be visible from US 36 and from Beechwood Center Drive. We do recommend approval of the waiver request, and we do recommend approval of the DPR. We recommend that approval with 3 standard conditions that are outlined up there and in your staff report on file, and I would be happy to answer any questions that you have.
So this is still being reviewed by the consulting engineer, is that correct?
So I believe this was attacked this past month, and so we're just waiting on some revisions and comments to be addressed. But as Bill indicated in the staff report, nothing to the magnitude that would prohibit a plan commission moving forward, as long as the standard condition of all of our comments being addressed are met.
So prior inspections have satisfied the general requirements, and now we're just going into the details?
Pretty much, yeah. And again, it's an infill development, so nothing major going on here. So,
Okay.
thank you.
Seeing the only waiver they're asking is glazing. Can you explain what glazing is for everybody?
Sure, it's fencing. It's fencing. Sorry, fenestration. That makes it clear as mud too. No, it's windows. So the way the ordinance is written, that the facades along the 36 corridor are supposed to be at least 35% windows on front facades and 10% windows on side facades. We call it glazing because it could be any number of things, but it's essentially having a transparent glass part of this.
So how does this compare to the existing center then?
Well, this has more glazing than the existing center. The existing center was built prior to the adoption of the standards in the overlay, so it's a fairly standard commercial shopping center.
Thank you.
So it has more glazing than the current
Yes.
development, but less than what we would normally require?
Less than what we would require on the overlay. It's somewhat mitigated by the fact that it's more than 600 feet from 36, and and has several land uses intervening between there. The idea is that you really have an attractive facade facing 36. I think that this addition will have an attractive facade facing 36. It's just got a minor deviation from the requirements of the ordinance.
The existing parking lot is there, correct?
That is correct,
There's
yes.
no addition.
Bill, did the petitioner share why the need to go to 28% versus being the 35?
Well, I don't recall. No, I mean, Mike is here. If he could probably speak to that, I can't.
Thanks.
Sorry.
Can I say something, please?
You'll have an
Okay.
opportunity.
The architect for the project.
Sure. We'll have the
Because we get
opportunity.
the 35%, by the way.
Okay. Any further questions for staff? Okay, I'd like the petitioner to come forward.
Yeah, I'm Howard Smiley, 1309 Pamela Drive, Franklin, Indiana, the architect for the project. We do 35% because when we initially, before the thing was added on to the existing and attached to the existing Rural King building, we had on the east elevation, we have 4 window sets in there. When we redid the thing, when we changed the plans, we only put 2 in, which makes 6 where it is. We do have, if you look at the east face, puts us up to 35.1%. So we do meet that qualification.
Have you presented that to staff?
No, because I just did it the other day, matter of fact. But you can see it on the elevations. So, but either way, we meet it.
Petitioner?
I don't have any other comments. Bill explained the project fairly well. I'd be happy to entertain any questions.
You could say your name and address.
I'm sorry, Michael Deere, 1070 Sycamore Court, Greenwood, Indiana.
So I do have a question for the petitioner. Is what we have here representative of what the change you just talked about? Okay, thank you.
So if they're now meeting the 35%, does that mean the waiver is no longer needed?
Yes, it
Is
doesn't.
that-
It's not
So
necessary
it's
anymore.
not, we're not addressing
Do we
that
have
then.
confirmation that it meets the 35% though?
Well, the petitioner's the one that gave me the original calculation that it was 28%, which is the reason we included the waiver in their transmittal letter. And that's the reason we did it. If the petitioner now says that it's 35, then we would put the petitioner.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, when we did a calculation, we thought it was pretty close to 35, and so we asked for a calculation. And when we got a transmittal letter, the transmittal letter said it was 28. And so that's what we used to do the calculation from.
Is this building being built in 2 phases? Shows a phase 1 and a phase 2.
Yes, that is correct. The part facing 36 will be built first, and then the part facing Beechwood would be built second.
Is there going to be a time delay then in that? I mean, are you going to do 1 phase and wait a year or 2 years, or just the way the property's set up, that's how you're going to develop the whole project?
It's partially funding. The timing is still uncertain. It depends on how the leasing goes and funding for the project.
And then my only other question is, on the west side of phase 2, is that parking back there then?
It's kind of a service courtyard.
Okay,
If you're talking in the U-shape area,
yeah.
yeah, that's.
You mentioned something about how leasing goes. I'm assuming that you're already talking to potential.
Yes, that is
Tenants.
correct.
Any further questions for the petitioner? Okay, thank you. Is there anybody present who would like to come forward and speak as to this agenda item? Okay, public hearing for this agenda item is closed. Discussion?
I have a follow-up question for Bill. So since it's 2 phases, and if they complete, if I understood correctly, phase 1 is going to be adjoining the current development. But in order to get to that 35% threshold, they need the glazing that's going to be on the eastern part.
Right.
So is that just like, at the end of the day, if phase 1 and 2 are built, then it's going to meet the threshold. If only phase 1 is built and phase 2 doesn't get built, or it's an extensive amount of time,
Right.
do we have to look at phase 1? Is that compliant with?
I don't think I've looked at it I didn't look at it in those terms. I felt that it would probably be built within the 10 years. So they have 10 years to build it. So they have 3 years to begin construction. And if they begin construction, then they have 10 years to build it out. We often ask petitioners if to do that prior planning, and if they're going to do a phase development, get both phases done during the DPR so that we sort of have a holistic view of what they want to do. And then we can just go straight to issuing building permits rather than bringing them back to the plan commission over and over and over again. So we looked at it holistically, and we have assumed that the entire building is going to be built within the 10-year time frame.
Okay, so as long as it's built within that 10 years, that includes the east facade. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Any further discussion?
When they finish the east elevation then, or the east side, it looks like there's going to be parking then on the north side of the east elevation. Is that correct?
That is correct. There's a few spaces that will be added off that service drive that comes in from the north or the rear of the project.
But the north wall of the east elevation is a brick wall, right? Let's see. Okay. Thank you.
So a question for Dan, then, if they're compliant and that's the staff's position now, there's no reason to make a motion, correct?
Yeah, you don't need to address the waiver issue now. You just focus on the overall DPR approval.
Thanks.
If there's no further discussion, we'll entertain a motion.
I'll make it. I move that we approve DPR 2207, Avon Retail Center, subject to the conditions outlined in the staff report on file.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, let's take a vote.
Catherine Ransberg,
4.
Paul Guggenberger,
4.
Bill Reed,
4.
Greg Zuzen,
4.
Mason Pike, 4. Dave Kaufman.
4.
Motion passes 7-0.
Did you
Very
get Jennifer?
We'll amend that. Jennifer Spencer,
4.
that's 7-0. Sorry, Jennifer.
Next item.
Map P 2216 Countryside Estates primary plat. This is a request for approval of a primary plat to subdivide 38.6 acres into 60 lots for a single-family residential subdivision with a waiver, again, of section 7.21J of the Unified Development Ordinance to allow a subdivision of 60 lots with one access point to a perimeter street. 2 access points are required. The property is 38.6 acres, zone R2, located near 7900 East County Road 100 North, right next to the church there on 100 North. There's no significant history in here. We believe that it was zoned R2 when it was annexed into the town. This is the property right here. It's been used historically as, I believe, athletic fields for the adjoining church right over here at Kingsway Church. There's a single-family residential development to the north with a access point right here. Single-family residential development to the south and residential development to the south and west. The church properties right here, couple single-family residential development houses down there. As I said, the Plan Commission has heard this once. There was a waiver request that was part of that original public hearing. The Plan Commission did deny that waiver request, and the petitioner then requested a continuance in order to redesign the subdivision. They went through a few redesigns, and they were redesigns of the subdivision, incorporating 2 access points into the subdivision to retain the 61 lots. And they were talking to our Public Works Department about this, and the Public Works Department has been sort of adamant that they only have the 1 access point, and that 1 access point lines up with that access point in the subdivision across the street. So the director has told him in no uncertain terms, as our director of public works does, that the only acceptable access point is 1 access point on 100 North directly across the street from that street that's across the street, which is that access point right there. This has been, so there's another contentious aspect of this petition, and that was the stub street into the adjoining church and the maybe rerouting a driveway through this subdivision. The property owner, who maintains an easement for a fairly long gravel driveway along the east side of this property, was not in favor of that, and therefore the petitioner has removed that proposed stub street in the southeast corner of the development and has refiled the waiver request for an additional public hearing. Going through it, this is the current layout of the lot. The original layout of the lot also had the access that stubbed right here, continued on into the Kingsway Church property. This is the design that took a few months to try to get through a review process, and that was moving this access point from this location all the way over to here, and then platting a right of way through the Kingsway Church property so that they were separated by the amount of space they needed in order to meet the standards of the ordinance and still maintain 61 lots on the property. The reason it took so long is that the Director of Public Works was adamant that this was an unsafe situation and that he didn't want this to happen on County Road 100 North. His opinion was that if there was going to be a subdivision here, that subdivision access point had to line up here with this existing subdivision entrance, and that these two entrances as proposed right here were actually more unsafe than simply retaining the one access point right here. Given that, we do recommend that you rehear and approve the waiver that's pending before you, repending. They've refiled it. They paid the $25 fee to have a rehearing of that. And we do recommend approval of the Countryside Estates. With that waiver, the only thing that's really outstanding on this particular subdivision is that one access point. And there's a provision in the ordinance, and it's not overt, it's sort of implied, and that is that subdivisions between 50 and 75 lots could get by with a boulevard entrance as their second means of ingress and egress. And then over 75, they're required to have two access points, and one of those must be a boulevard entrance. And then over, I believe, 150 or 200, they have to have three access points. So they do have a boulevard entrance. That boulevard entrance is consistent with the requirements of the ordinance. So I don't think that there would be any problem with emergency access into this subdivision if there were, for instance, an accident at the entrance to the subdivision. We do recommend approval subject to the three standard conditions outlined in our staff report and shown up there in that slide. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Bill, can you elaborate more on the objection by the Public Works Director to having the two? I mean, you've alluded to safety. Can you be a little more specific about that?
Well, we did include his letter in the staff report. If I can find the silly thing, which I can't.
Last 2 pages.
So the Director of Public Works did submit a letter to the file. And his indication is, to be very clear, the only Countryside Estates County Road 100 access configuration that the staff is in favor of, regardless of what the ordinance allows or requires, is one single entrance that lines up exactly with the Forest Commons Drive. Staff is only in favor of the waiver if all items below are legally agreed to and binding. Contribution to the widening of County Road 100 North, additional growth and development in the area is going to require a widening. The estimated cost of widening the segment of County Road 100 North is estimated about $6.1 million. Staff recommends a construction of an eastbound dedicated left turn lane to Forest Common Drive to be constructed in lieu of a cash contribution. Staff is in favor of enforcing the requirement for the installation of a westbound dedicated left turn lane for the Countryside Estates entrance. And where any road modification is made via a new street approach, acceleration lanes, deceleration lanes, passing blisters, turn lanes, added lane width, et cetera, the entire pavement width, curb to curb, shoulder to shoulder, edge of pavement to edge of pavement shall be surfaced, milled, and resurfaced to provide for a uniform profile grade and a new homogeneous surface. And so that there's 2 or 3 other commitments thermoplastic pavement markings and other sorts of things that we typically take care of during secondary plating approval. But the main ones are adding a left turn lane on 100 North into the adjoining into the subdivision to the north, and then milling down asphalt curb to curb along 100 North, and then overlaying that with a new surface coat. And there obviously at the edges be some things done to eliminate the probability, or at least reduce the probability of long-term maintenance concerns. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Well, my question is, because I'm looking at this first paragraph of the letter, excuse me, and you're right, they're adamant, lots of capital letters here. Staff is not in favor of constructing 2 entrances, but I'm not seeing a why.
I'll talk about that a little bit. I'm just speaking to what I've heard him say on various
Sure.
cases, and Ryan Cannon. Yeah, they're concerned about conflicting turning movements. And so can you bring up the previous one that showed, maybe no, the one that showed, yeah, that one. Go back there, yeah. If they take the road to the west there, then it comes out between 2 existing drives. If you go to the drive to the right that was proposed, again, you're kind of mid-course. But particularly the drive on the left, if someone's in that driveway to the left, to the west, and they want to turn left, and someone coming out of that drive wants to turn left, if these drives aren't aligned, you have a conflicting turning problem. You would have them at both those entrances, but particularly to the one at the west. So that's one of the things that the Department of Public Works always wants to look at is we really don't want to create any conflicting turning movements. We'd much rather line up dead on with an existing boulevard drive to the north there, because then we don't have conflicting movements. Everybody's lined up right across from each other, and we know how to do that. We drivers know how to do that. But if somebody's offset 30 feet over here to my left, and they're turning left and I'm turning left, who goes first? Nobody knows. It's a conflicting movement. Secondly, as you have heard many times, the town's position always is that the fewer drives on our roads, the better. People talk about difficulty in getting out onto busy roadways. One entrance solves some of that problem because there's spacing and gaps, and you don't have 2 people trying to pull out. So aside from the engineering aspects, those are some concepts that I hear the department talk a lot about, especially when I looked at that drawing, the west entrance. I thought you've got conflicts on both sides of you to the east and the west. Who gets to go first? What does that turn look like? And so that's part of it. But again, traditionally, we have always tried to line up directly across from another major entrance if we can. And in this case, we're lucky we have one to line up with. And so maybe that gives you some context for their thinking.
That's exactly what I was looking for, is the understanding as to why this waiver is a good idea for the town. So thank you for that.
Bill, I have a question that you said that a boulevard entrance could serve as 2 entrances that would meet that requirement.
Yeah, in this provision here now, so there's a requirement that in the ordinance for a boulevard entrance for that boulevard to extend a certain distance down, and it actually extends farther down than what the ordinance requires, but there's a break in it. And the break in it is to allow access to these 2 lots right here. It'd be a driveway that straddles this. So there's a break in it, but it's still built to the standard in our ordinances. In fact, it exceeds it because it brings a boulevard like right down to here. They've just put a break in it right here, but it still extends the proper distance down from the right of way here. It's actually just that break allows access to these two properties.
So my question is, if that meets the standard for 2 entrances, why do we need a waiver?
It doesn't, the ordinance doesn't meet the standard. So the ordinance implies that it would be okay if between like 50 and 75 lots if you just have a boulevard entrance, but it doesn't overtly state it.
So the ordinance is developed for safety then.
Right.
So in case you got one entrance blocked, you have another entrance so you can get in for an emergency in that subdivision. So I guess I got a question, I have a concern that Avon staff would make a recommendation, be adamant about the recommendation that goes against the ordinance, which is there for safety. And then the new design doesn't even have a stub road, which is another question I have about that it seems like if we're going back to one entrance, then don't we also have a requirement to have a stub road for future development so that we would have a second entrance? So we still need to address that? Or do we need a waiver for that also?
The ordinance doesn't specify that you have to have a stub. It's more permissive. So the ordinance doesn't specify that you have to stub it.
Okay.
It's highly encouraged, but not required.
Which we want for future connectivity.
One of the feedback that we received during the public hearing was that stub street was undesired from, not from the petitioner, but from other people,
From,
members of the commission.
and not everybody on the commission
Not
said
everybody,
that.
no, but they were members.
Because there's ways to manage a stub street, right, that would prohibit traffic moving, using that stub street. And I know that was part of the discussion, is not having traffic go onto that drive. But a stub street can be developed with barriers, so it's not in use until future use is available. So I'm just, one is the language that's used by the Public Works Director to me is indicative of one entrance, but yet the reason why we have two entrances is for safety, and that bothers me. And if the boulevard entrance serves, then again, I question the waiver. I think you explained it well, but.
I think that from the Public Works Director standpoint, I'm sorry, I keep on stealing your thunder. I think from the Public Works Director is looking at it from the standpoint of, yes, it would be preferable to have two entrances if we could have those two entrances connect to 100 North safely. But having those two entrances by ordinance is actually more unsafe than it would be if we just had the one entrance point. So we could discard the two entrances, consolidate it down to one entrance point, and be more safe than we would be if we built to ordinance.
Which gets back to then part of that would be that if the development didn't have the number of lots it had, it could make do with one entrance if the lots were reduced to the number allowed by ordinance.
That's true, yeah. If they reduced it to 49, it wouldn't require the waiver. However, we should be cognizant of the fact that the maximum density of an R2 development is 3 units an acre, and this is literally almost half. It's 1.58. So, I mean, it's not like they're pushing the density to the point of the maximum density that would be allowed selling district. They're almost half of what they're permitted to have. Oh, yeah. And, okay, one more thing. Sorry. I just got to bring this up. They're also retaining a huge amount of existing woodlands on the south part of this, which is a source of concern to that neighborhood to the south. And so there is a benefit in that they have nearly 40% of this subdivision in open space. Now I'm done.
I just want to point out, Paul, it goes to maybe your first question about, what about this safety issue about what if a lane is blocked and how do we get emergency personnel? Is that the whole idea about this secondary access is somewhat, how do we get emergency vehicles in if there's an accident there? And that's why the distinction between a normal entrance and a boulevard comes into play. The boulevard entrance is much wider. It has multiple lanes. As you can see, that lot at the, just to the west of the entrance, has kind of a funny shape because we've expanded that drive, that right of way fans out to the north. And so the thought about boulevard entrances is they really provide almost like a 3 or 4 lane entrance so that if one side's blocked, the emergency personnel would just come down the wrong way, but they have a way to get in there. So the distinction in the ordinance about, unless you have a boulevard entrance, there's a reason for that. And it's because of that wide entrance. We make them make that, it has to be wide to have all the different turning movements up there, different lanes. So that's why it talked about, but Bill's right. It could have said 50 to 75 Boulevard, you're good. It just didn't go quite that far. And so it doesn't create a standard we can hang our hat on. But I think that's why the staff is recommending the waiver, because the fact that there's a boulevard entrance there really should matter to us. You know, all the different things we're requiring there from a safety point of view and getting an emergency vehicle in, the fact that it's a boulevard entrance really matters.
I think this is a good example of where the intent of a statute or ordinances finds itself butting up with the reality of application of that ordinance. In this case, we've got, if we stick to the technicality, to the technical requirement of the ordinance, which is put in place to create a safer road, we actually create a less safe road by sticking to the letter of the law. And which is why the waiver process exists.
And I might also say that you all recall, and I'm going to mention it again in training, but I say it every year, which is you can only get waivers where the ordinance says you can have a waiver. So it's not like you guys just can waive anything. Okay, this is one of the things where the ordinance allows flexibility. It says, well, you can grant a waiver from the 2 entrance requirement if you wish. That should be a signal to you that somebody contemplated that you might need flexibility. That you guys, you're not allowed to waive lots of things, but this is one of those where, again, because of the circumstances that you might come up against, the town council has given you this flexibility in the ordinance. That doesn't mean you have to take it, and it still means that the granting of a waiver is in your discretion, but it isn't like it's not allowed. It was actually contemplated, and there have been times over my time here, which is over 20 years, that we granted waivers like this, but we wanted to see some things. And again, boulevard entrance would be one. Are there other options? In this case, what I think you see the Department of Public Works saying that in looking at the available options, Mr. Moore thinks those are all worse than having a waiver and having one entrance. Now, that doesn't mean you have to agree with them. You again must exercise your discretion. But that's what I think between your last time you saw this and now, there's been some weighing of options and redesigns and conversations. And that is how, Mr. Moore got where he got and the planning staff came up with their recommendation.
Any other questions for staff?
One more question. So just to be clear, the boulevard entrance was a new proposal. It wasn't what was originally proposed. That was a change.
No, it was part of the original proposal.
That's what I thought. I thought it was as well. So
Yeah, the original, the boulevard, there was some, a lot of the details for like a boulevard entrance, we hash out during secondary approval, construction details. So I think that in the original plan, there was a boulevard entrance that was shown, but the design of it wasn't necessarily consistent with what either Steve wanted to see or some of the remonstrators, because they wanted to see dedicated left turn, dedicated right and through turn. And I don't think that the original proposal had that level of detail in it. This one does. This one has a dedicated left turn, right and a through lane, and then an in lane, and then a fairly long boulevard coming down. So some of the details that we normally only hash through during a secondary plat approval process, we've gotten sort of out of the way at this point.
Okay, I don't remember any strong comments from the Director of Public Works back in November. So is that through this exploration process, that's where it's kind of come from?
Yeah, the petitioner approached the director with the 2 access point option, and the director was not happy. So he wanted to make sure that the commission understood what his desires were along County Road 100 North.
All right, thanks for the explanation. Appreciate it.
I think the other thing too to remind us is there's that easement you had talked about that goes from 100 North south to the home that's back in there, runs parallel with that property line. And when we talked about that hammerhead exit for future development, they couldn't get across that easement. They could put it there, but they couldn't get across it. So to me, it was defeating its own purpose. So I think that's why it went back. And then when you look at the access points, he doesn't, the public director of public works doesn't agree because this doesn't have over 1,200 feet of distance to separate those two access points. So I have other questions for the petitioner to really just continue to talk about safety, because I think that's the key word of this whole development. That's all I have.
Any further questions for staff? Okay, we invite the petitioner to come forward.
Good evening. For the record, Jeff Banning, Banning Engineering, 853 Columbia Road, Suite 101 in Plainfield. I also have here Lance Farrell from my office and Matt Roush from Ryan Homes, and representatives from Kingsway as well. So good debate here this evening, and I think some of these items we can discuss and kind of put forward to you. First of all, couple things. We have, as Bill was saying, we have done a more detailed design that we've passed on to Steve Moore, Public Works, and how we've come up with what we've proposed to do here at the entrance. We are showing extensive improvements at the intersection. There'll be left turn lane, right turn lane tapers. There will be the center median as we go south. This was our original proposal. Thank you very much. So you can see what we presented to you a couple months ago. And the two probably changes, actually really one significant change, is the stub street. You can see that Walker Drive. Oh, thank you. Right here. This has now been eliminated. And then, like I said, we have done a significant, at this point in the process, design here and worked with staff. Do I have the control to do this? Then is the new, which we no longer have a stub street, and it doesn't show it in this drawing. I've got another drawing. This is where our entrance will be and the improvements. So here are the two side-by-side changes. All right. And then, of course, that you had seen for two entrances, which we were not in favor of as well. Didn't expect on the waiver to even be an issue when we were here a couple months ago. Let's talk about this waiver a second. So we all drove into the hall this evening. There's one point of access into the town hall. There's a boulevard entrance, and I'd be willing to bet there was more traffic coming in and out of the town hall in a day's time than will come out of this entrance for this subdivision. We are lined up with an apartment complex south of 36. So we've got driveways aligned. There are 250 units in that apartment complex with one entrance. I'm not going to go through every subdivision. And here again, what we approved in the past and what we're here for today, I'm not trying to compare that. I'm just saying from a safety standpoint, we feel like the best action is to line up these two driveways, put that boulevard entrance in, and have a better situation from a traffic flow standpoint and getting people directed to particular locations rather than having multiple locations. I can tell you 30 years ago, before I started Banning Engineering, the county had a plan to widen 10th Street, 100 North from 260 Road. That before Avon was even a town. As you can see, we're not even there yet. A lot of this has been driven by private development, and there has actually been a step in trying to access points. Used to, in the subdivision control ordinance, have a signature street part of the ordinance. totally come through on the new no point we just put together. But that limited access points as well. And I believe that's what the current ordinance is trying to do, is to limit those access points, put those in key locations, and for helping with traffic flow on 100 North, and then making safer conditions with turn lanes and tapers at specific intersections. So that's what we're trying to get accomplished here this evening. That's the reason for the request for the waiver. Why not stub something to the south? Well, there's a wooded area. There's nothing to stub a street to. Why not to the west? Well, there's a creek and a wooded area and nothing to stub a street to. Why not to the east? Well, the east, we've already talked about the easement. We can't cross that. We can stab the church, doesn't never have a plan for property. So that's why we've taken that stub out. So hopefully that answers the questions in regards to that. We just feel like that this design is a much better design, a safer design, and something that works, better for the citizens of Avon. I know a couple things that came up, and we're talking about the entrances and divided entrances and the islands coming in. To the west of this is Harvest Ridge. They have a divided entrance. If anybody's ever been in there, it actually have a island like what we're requesting for a couple driveways to get in and out. As you look to the north at Forest Commons, they have a divided entrance. They actually do have a break in there, although it's not necessarily for a driveway. One other point of clarification, there's 109 lots in Forest Commons with one entrance. So like I said, I don't want to, say anything about what was approved previously, but we have a similar situation on the south side, basically half the number of lots. We feel like we've put a nice development together, saving a lot of a lot of common area that we could have developed in, could have found other options to try to get more lots, but we felt like going with the straight zoning was the way to go, what the community would have wanted and expected for this property. And so with that, I can answer any additional questions and go from there.
Do you by chance have a copy of that detailed design that you were just talking about up there? What I'm
Probably
looking for-
not I got a set of plans back here. Do we have another? I can't remember.
Well, because
Oh, there we go. I'm sorry, I didn't go.
to look at is the left turn lane going west into this development and a decel lane in the north going into Forest Commons. And then opposite going east, you're going to have decel lane come into this, and you need a left turn lane to go into Forest Commons. Address those items up there?
Yeah, so the left lane would be against each other like you would normally have, with right turn lanes on either side and tapers to get you back onto the roadway. Yes.
Okay, then my other question then is that wide, because it is only one entrance, is that, and you referenced Harvest Ridge and you referenced Forest Commons and they have boulevard entries. Is this similar to those boulevard entries, or it appears to be the same? However, the distance, the road widths are different.
Yeah, no, very, very similar. I can't say that I've looked at those to the exact, but very similar. I mean, it's pretty typical entry design.
And then, so lastly then, because you're lot 37, and I'm not a developer, but we're trying to save as much land as we can. We had 2 lots that were probably just shy of meeting the minimum size. Can we consider, now, I don't know if the words, eliminate 37 to make it a more straight in entrance? Because I believe the way looking at this, that boulevard design has to go at least beyond Woodland Glen Drive going south, just in case there is a major accident there for egress ingress.
Right. So lot 37 will get access on this road right here. It will not access out here.
What about the driveways then for lots 1, 2, and 3?
So lots 1 and 2 would be right here. Lot 3 would be here.
So address the safety concern for those people backing out of their driveway.
It's very similar to the subdivision up here and the subdivision over here. I mean, yeah.
Well, you make a good point, and I did not go back and look at that, but I will. I think that's my only concern, because it's one entry. I want to make the boulevard deep enough, wide enough, even if it meets the minimum standard. We've got a little bit of land. Maybe we should go a little bit beyond the minimum standard. Instead of being the minimum all the time, maybe go maximum.
Yeah, and we can definitely look at that. Like I said, we still need to do final construction plans. We've got room, we can widen it out over here if that's something that we need to do.
And then do we have the easements for future right away for future improvement on 100 North?
Yes, we dedicated that. That's that line right here. And then we also have, one thing that hasn't really been brought up, we've shown a lot of common area along the south side of 100 North that are landscaped. And the homes pushed south of there. And kind of, this is the wooded area that we're going to continue to save, have some trails through there. There's quite areas in the staff left. One note you brought up, I'm sorry, we fixed the 2 lots that were not quite the width. It was a rounding error. They were off like 100th. So those have all been fixed. Those
You're
2
like a
lots.
banker. When this interest, you round up.
Basis points, right?
The other couple of questions, and you did address them. To the south, it doesn't appear there's going to be any trees, right? And then to the minimal, you mentioned the 2 subdivisions, Harvest Ridge, and then the other one.
Right. So, there'll be minimal disruption on either area. The goal is to save as many trees as possible. As we all know, with the emerald ash borer and some of the, dead trees that are happening, we had this discussion for Avon Logistics back in the day. There's going to probably need some trees that need to be taken down. We'll meet the requirements of the ordinance from a, landscaping, buffering standpoint. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further questions for the petitioner? Okay, if you'd like to have a seat, we'll
Thank
take
you.
questions and comments from anybody present who'd like to speak on this agenda item. Okay. Please state your name and address.
Oh, yes. I am Stephen Kilborn. I live at 7701 East County Road, 100 North in Avon. My mother spoke at the last hearing. We live in the property sort of adjacent to this with the driveway, and she was a star last time, but she's very scared of public speaking, so I said I would take the fall this time. Sorry that I'm not as endearing as her, but I hope you'll just, allow me to make a couple comments. So first off, right, obviously there is maybe some soft implication at points in this ordinance, but obviously they do still need a waiver. And point of a waiver is, right, when you feel like the law is too rigid, like we were saying, you need flexibility. The law is too rigid. It's getting in the way of the community's interests. And it looks like this one entrance schematic is not totally ideal. There's some safety features that we would love to have that we don't. We don't love one entrance. It might be nice to have a wider boulevard. It might be nice to have a stub, this, that, and the other thing. Seems like sort of the developer has positioned the framing of the waiver for the compelling community interest for and the rules getting in the way of good community interest is we want one entrance, not 2 entrances. The 2 entrances are bad. And they've shown the pictures and they've said there's safety issues and all these sorts of things. I would just like to comment that every time we've talked to this developer, they've said in basically explicit terms, if we don't get this, right, someone else is gonna come in, not whoever comes back after us. You know, house, they've said calling my mom. You know, they've said this to other people in this comment talking to staff, town hall office. There's a really clear messaging coming from them that if they don't get the waiver, it's just not going to happen. They actually don't want to do this with two entrances. And so there's a little bit of a false alternative in terms of safety and the community interest in terms of which is safer, one entrance or two. It seems very much like the actual alternative is which is safer, one entrance or zero. Is this actually a situation where we can design a safe neighborhood? And it seems like, right, yeah, because of the dimensions and where the roads would have to go and easements and all these other things and density requirements and yield requirements and so on for the developer that the sale is contingent on, it seems like it's just not feasible to make this subdivision happen in a safe way. And so I would just say that, yeah, it seems like the distinction, the alternatives being presented for the consideration of the compelling community interest are not entirely accurate, right? There's a bit of a false alternative here, namely that there really could be a two entrance subdivision happening here. Everything they've said, things that church leadership has said to my mother and I say basically, yeah, if the waiver doesn't happen, that's it. They're out. They don't want this to happen. And so it seems like the community interest is, do we want this neighborhood at all? Obviously, I can't speak for you guys and all the considerations you have to make on that particular issue. But as a member of the community, I happen to know a lot of people who don't want this. I've never met anyone who did think we need more subdivisions and more cars on 10th Street. But that's my perspective. My perspective as a member of the community, some small, tiny drop in the bucket of what constitutes community interest. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Is anybody else signed up to speak on this agenda item?
Linda Leonard, 7782 Jessica Lane. What's the point in having rules if you don't make the developer go by them? Either put her down to 49, which why would you be okay with it? Why would you approve her of rules that grew as necessary?
I mean, I'm 493 East 100 North. I'm 2 driveways left of this, the black brick ranch house. My husband and I own 3 acres. Actually back up to this property. But in addition to that, I'm a practicing landscape architect over 20 years. I own my own business. So I feel like having a little bit more education to the table for my neighbor community too regarding this issue and issue at hand first, and this issue my husband and I take property, but like a lot of property, a lot of those woods are actually ours. I've met with the county already and I've called about how they were not surveyed properly, but we never heard back. Second of all, at night, this community approved anything like that. As a practical architect, it's prohibited. I understand the comparisons. I've done this before. I work in the city often. I understand the comparisons of different neighborhoods in the entrance here, but when you do that, you have to compare apples to apples. You cannot compare this situation to the town hall and a 4-lane highway with turn lanes. It's not the same thing. You have private drives across the street. You have private drives next door. You have another drive for a church. You have the wedding barn that we all know of that is very busy, and they do a really great job mitigating and keeping it safe. But just the other night, it was very busy. I can personally tell you I have 3 teenagers in my house right now. One drives. One has her permit, and the other one is 1 year behind that. And one of my children goes to Danville, so he turns left out of the driveway every day. And it scares me to death every morning when he turns left to go out of there because it's so dangerous. People speed. I've called and reported it that people need to be there to watch the speeding and ticket, and it does not happen. My husband and I walk every day. We walk through Harvest Ridge, so I know that area really well. I know those entrances. And 10th Street is incredibly dangerous, incredibly fast. Introducing another neighborhood with entrances, none of which line up with completely unsafe, is terrible for the community. It makes me, I can't even tell you how many see, one of which that is into our yard. There is a swale there, there's easements there, and I understand all that, but you get a lot of people 50 plus miles per hour on that road. And, you know, my neighbors to it as well. From a business perspective, I understand it. I understand how business works, the development of it, and the community and what it brings to the community. And I understand all that, but when you cross the borders of ethics and safety, that is a credible concern. For those that don't, I really sometimes say, what are long-term 100 north? And this, we're not. Well, there were no plans as of right now between, you know, Dan Jones and 267. Anyone that travels down that road knows that that's as many people as we want in a community use that walking path, and we don't have plans for the safety of that road. That's a huge concern. And then we're going to add that many more families. Now, you can tell me all day that that's not going to bring that much more traffic to the area, but that is not true. I want to see the statistics. I want to see the research of that and the numbers, because I can tell you, even on Sundays, when the church comes in, it's busy. When members are leaving across the street from my house, when they're going in and out, the wedding barn, the lights, it's bright in my house when they're leaving events and going in and out of there. The neighborhood to the left. The other thing to take into regard is there is if you turn left, there's a hill there, and people come up flying there. And if you're turning in Harvest Ridge or at rush hour when people are coming home from work, turning left in Harvest Ridge, it backs way up. Well, then you get it to back up to the roundabout, and we all know what happens there. And then we're going to throw another entrance in that progression. Does not solve traffic we already have in that area. I mean, there's kids, how many kids live in that area? No one can walk their kids to school. This is Avon. This was the point. And it's not safe right there. So I understand the concept. As a businesswoman, I respect it. But, you know, square peg round hole situation, like, is this really the best situation for this use?
Can you wrap it up? Thank you. Next.
Daniel Hoffman.
Hi there, my name is Daniel Hoffman. I live at 1025 Horse Commons Drive. I just recently moved to this fine community, and I wanted to voice some concerns that I have for the commission. To be honest, I don't think that the developer has provided an appropriate plan that meets the standards of your ordinances. Bring the commission into ordinance 12.6, section 12.6. First, I'd like to point out 12.6 D1B, which says that the value of the area adjacent to the property, quote, will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner. I don't believe the developer has demonstrated that the adjoining or the adjacent properties, or this woman here who lives just down the road, that those people are not going to be impacted by this decision. So I would like the commission to make sure that you're being mindful of that in your determination. I'd also like to point out 12.6 D1C, which states that a practical difficulty cannot be based on perceived reduction of or restriction on economic gain. The developer has not provided any basis for why they cannot develop this with less homes. Ultimately, the option was, well, the first thing we're going to do is provide one entrance and exit, and we're going to develop 60 plus homes in that area. And then we take this break of several months, and then they represent, and what they say is, well, now we're presenting two options. The other option is that we're going to have two entrances and exits, but they know that that option is a failure. So really what they've done is created a straw man for you, hoping that you'll identify that this one entrance and exit is the appropriate option, when I don't feel like they've demonstrated any legally sufficient basis for why they should get a variance in this instance. I'd like to bring the commission's attention to section 12.7D, and specifically, if you'd like, I can read these sections of your zoning ordinances to you.
You have a limited amount of time, so make
D1,
your decision wisely.
yes, the D1C, D1D, D1E, D1F, D1G, 12.7 D2E, and D2J. Each of those sections of your ordinances prohibit this council from granting, or this commission from granting a variance when you can't demonstrate with, I believe the criteria is adequate evidence. That's your standard. So you have to have adequate evidence that all of these sections of your ordinance are not going to be impacted. But again, the developer has not been able to provide any evidence. All he's done is said, well, here's the option. Two entrances is out. So we're going to widen this entrance and exit a little bit and hope that you approve that. That's not a plan. So I guess as a citizen who lives directly across the street, I think that there are some concerns about giving a variance to a developer when really they haven't presented any real justification for why it's necessary outside of they're going to have less money in their pocket. I guess that's my concern for this commission in giving variance. So I would like you all to read those sections of your ordinance before you grant this variance, and hopefully that you will make the right decision and allow them, but ensure that they're developing it in compliance with zoning ordinance that you have on your books. Thank you.
Next.
Hi there, my name is Jeff Foster. I live at 7574 Black Walnut Drive in Avon. So our property is to the south of 20 or 19 across the trees. I just wanted to say a couple things. I really appreciate the developer's attempt to conserve the trees. That provides a lot of value, not just aesthetically to the neighborhood, to the south and the west of that. So I do appreciate that effort by the developer to try to preserve that for our families. I also would just want to speak to the development of property in general. I think that having a residential section here is a good development and a good use of the space. Obviously, I'm not on a residential committee. I don't know the city specifications, but even as a local resident, I think this is a good decision to have homes in this location. I think it's good for our community to bring houses in. Contrary to one of the other speakers, I do think it's good for Avon to grow, and I think this is an appropriate place for residential development. But a big reason I'm in favor of this is that I feel good way. I'm not a member, so I don't attend, but has a positive influence on our neighborhood, and that developed, it's not used. And from my understanding, there's not an intention by the church to use that space. So if that helps the community by providing homes, and if it helps the church by providing a sale and using that land for some kind of purpose, it can't stay a unused farmland forever. Like, that's not the way our city is going to be. So I would just ask the commission to consider that. As a local resident just to the south of that, my fellow members have had some good things to think about, and I'm still trying to contemplate all the implications of that, but I appreciate the developer's intention to preserve the trees. I think the use of this land is appropriate, and I think it would be a good investment for Kingsway as a whole. Thank you.
Next up, we have David.
Hi, my name's Dave Gettner. I live at 7531 East County Road 100 North. I was here before. I gave out my speech. My neighbor gave a wonderful speech, just like that. I talked to you guys about, the speed, traffic issues and stuff like that. Can I show the map too, or the map with the second entrance, which I was informed about before?
I believe you have the picture up there.
Oh, there we go. Thank you, Amy. This entrance right there is showing coming out. It's right next to my property line, stuff like that. You see how they moved plot number 27 over. Again, same thing when the surveyor crew came out, he served wrong. He walked through my yard, my old post that I tore the fence out of. It was a rotten fence. I just cut it out, something like that. So he's running his thing and say through my yard. But more importantly, what I'm really here to talk about is where the exit comes out at. That is a school bus drop zone. So that's a pickup and drop zone right there. There's another one a couple hundred yards back towards my neighbor's house. But there are multiple kids that get picked up and dropped off right at that location. So if you try to put in another secondary exit right there, are we impacting the safety of the children going to school? Has that been brought up, looked at, or been mentioned in the paperwork that's been proceeded to you guys? Because apparently no one's been out there to check out at 8 o'clock in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning, and at 9 o'clock in the morning, see if the kids are getting dropped off and picked up at that location, or were picked up at that morning, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, getting dropped off. So that is right there is a point. The buses stop, kids are crossing the street, and as my neighbor said, there's traffic. There's times where people fly through that area, don't stop for the school buses. I see it every day. He's talking about the trees being protection, so there's little displacement for neighborhoods to the left, to the south. But how about my house, the neighbor's house like that? There's very minimal trees right there. If they're putting a plot 27 right there, or even around that area, 26, 25, all that dust, debris and stuff like that, wouldn't that have a negative impact on those residents, which is my neighbors, and therefore out? I got young babies, stuff like that. I'm fully aware I'll probably change my filters out weekly. If there's, trucks running back there, gravel, dirt flying everywhere, the implication of there's no barrier. What I'm saying, there's no barrier right there, like tree line barriers to the neighborhoods. There's nothing there. So beyond that, I've talked to you guys before. I appreciate you guys listening, stuff like that. My neighbor had a lot of great things to say about the traffic going up and down the road. It is chaotic at the least. I know we talked about one entrance for 45 houses, how that met. Why is the standard being changed now? Why are we letting them go back to 60? So like that. And if there's 60 at that location, safety of kids going to and from school. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Is there anybody else present who would like to come and speak on this agenda item? Ma'am?
My name's Barbara Kilborn, 7701 East Road 100 North. I'm the one that had the stub thingy. I just wanted to say that the engineers, when they came out to put the stakes, they had them like almost a half an acre of property, and I was told I was allowed to go pull the stakes out. So, I mean, if they couldn't even measure my property right, I don't know how good they are at measuring anything. And also, when they say a double entrance, I've seen accidents that take up as much space as two entrances next to each other. I mean, I've seen a car here, and then fire trucks here and here. But one entrance is going to cover most wrecks that I've seen out on 10th Street.
Is there anybody else present who would like to speak on this agenda item? Okay, public hearing on this agenda item is closed. Discussion.
So one of the things that Bill brought up, and I'd ask you to help us, Bill, that the number of lots that we're seeing in here are not the maximum number that could be developed in this area. Is that correct?
Well, the maximum density on this zoning district is 3 units an acre, and they're coming in at about 1.58. So they're just slightly more than half of what the density is permitted on the.
So theoretically, we could be looking at 120-ish.
Theoretically, I mean, yeah, I don't think, yeah, that's theoretically they could. I'm trying to imagine to get that kind of density, you'd probably have to get rid of the entire wooded lot to the south because that takes up probably about 36% of the property. And then you'd probably have to do the enhanced architectural standards to approach that density. But yeah, that's a possibility.
So that's that question just to be sure, but at a density like that, I definitely would be opposed to one entrance regardless of the style. I still have a hard time supporting one entrance. I know there are concerns that were voiced here about two entrances and how that would be designed, and maybe that design that's proposed isn't the appropriate design. I still think that the ordinance was developed for safety. I'm concerned that boulevard or not, that if it was blocked, you block 60 residences from have the access either to get out or for emergency vehicles to get in. So I don't know what would be a good design. I just feel like one entrance to that density is not appropriate. And I then also have concern about where the boulevard entrance is designed at now. You got a right turn lane there, so the residents that have the stub or the easement coming out, will they be caught by the traffic leaving the subdevelopment? So, we're not able to solve all the traffic issues on 100 North because we have private drives going onto that, but lining up with Forest Commons to the north there, lining up with that entrance is probably the right thing to do, but it still seems like there needs to be some plans for a future second entrance, ingress, egress in that, that's where I like the Stubb Street. Maybe my fellow commissioners didn't like that, but it gave for future opportunity, whether it's in use now or years to come.
I disagree. I think the ordinances were created with safety in mind, but as I said earlier, you know what they say about good intentions, we spent years developing these ordinances, and we had staff and and consultants who put a great deal of hard work and sweat into developing these ordinances with the idea of there being safety. However, as Mr. Taylor pointed out, the reason that we are given the opportunity to waiver is because sometimes the intentions of the ordinances butt up directly against the reality of how the ordinances are being applied. In this situation, we've had the Director of Public Works, and Mr. Taylor did a very good job of explaining to my satisfaction why. The Director of Public Works is strongly opposed to two entrances. I felt like I got a satisfactory answer from Mr. Taylor in that two entrances would actually meet the law of the ordinances, but then it would be contrary to the intention The intention of the ordinances is to create a safer driving environment. If we stick to the letter of the law with the ordinances, we create a safe environment. If we allow the waiver, which we are granted the opportunity to do, we create a safer environment.
I would disagree a little bit with that. I mean, 2 entrances is for safety. Saying that it's safe doesn't automatically mean that having 1 entrance is safe enough. And I think that's what you're saying. The ordinance has a density requirement.
Well, but I mean, the most perfectly safe would be to not build anything there at all. And that is not, I mean, as it was pointed out, it's not going to be just sitting there as fallow farmland forever. It's going to be developed.
But
one way or the
would it be
other,
developed
so-
with a 49 house?
That's a
density?
question.
You know, that's
And
another option.
something that occurred to me based on something somebody said, we talked about, and I'm horrible at remembering the names, but we talked about that development behind Costco. And they have that emergency.
Into the Costco parking lot.
Yeah, with a fire lock box of some kind. Maybe, I mean, I don't know. I think that what we're looking at 2 imperfect options.
Bill, is there a stub street in the neighborhood to the south of this where those woods are?
No.
Okay.
No, there's no stub streets into this property. If there were, we would require them to be connected.
Thanks.
I do think that the idea of a boulevard serves the function of 2 entrances, even though it is just 1 entrance. And is it possible that there could be some huge calamitous accident that would prevent the residents from leaving the community? Yes.
So there's always
But that's
chance,
always
right?
that.
I mean, there's always the opportunity for there to be accidents. The idea is I mean, it's that 1 in a million chance where there's an accident at the entrance and also some emergency within the subdivision that the first responders have to go to the accident and also get into the subdivision to a heart attack or domestic violence or some other such thing. And that's the reason for the boulevard entrance. And like I said, the ordinance doesn't overtly say it, and maybe it should. But the boulevard entrance is a option between 50 and 75 lots. And then over 75, you would have two entrance and exits. The reason it's not, the reason they still have to come to a waiver is because it's not an overt standard. That's not the way it's specified, but it's implied in the ordinance. If we were talking about a 90 lot subdivision, I don't even think the staff would recommend approval of that waiver, but because we're dealing with under 75 lots, that's the reason we think the waiver is appropriate.
And how many lots are the one entrance?
12.
20%. So that's what I am weighing is that 20% significant enough to say no to the boulevard? Or is that acceptable enough to say yes, a boulevard? Because based on what's presented, the 2 is not, in an ideal state, yes, right? If we could have those 2 entrances match up in an ideal state, but this is not an ideal state. And so that's what I'm weighing is that 20% differential, is that significant enough to deny the waiver or not?
Jennifer and Bill, do you have any thoughts?
I guess the only thing I'm concerned with is the whole notion of traffic control. I know the point was brought up, in terms of people going down there and they get used to a certain flow of traffic. Is this enough to necessarily, will people understand that ultimately there's ostensibly another group of people in there and that they're going to need to kind of change their ways? And of course, I know it's never that easy. But that's certainly something to contemplate. I know there's certainly, points we all deal with everywhere that, I mean, it's great to have an access or a decel lane, access road or whatever, but, we all know sometimes we ultimately take our lives in our own hands when we're even just doing what we think is just a basic left-hand turn. So that kind of concerns me.
I believe this is called a conundrum.
Well, I think Dave hit it too, is, we could have a maximum number of lots of whatever that number is, and I think the magic minimum number is 49. And I do know, when we looked at this earlier, and I don't recall the number, so I could be wrong when I say, it started at 61, and because we were trying to get the Hammerhead exit, we were probably down to 57, 58. So, I mean, there was movement in that direction.
We're still at 61.
Right, but he's saying that had they gone with the two exits, it would have been.
Oh.
They were going to reduce their density.
Right, right.
And I'm certainly against two points of egress ingress. That doesn't make any sense. I guess I want to hear, when people meet people, some people misunderstand things, some things interpret things differently, and some flat out maybe don't tell the truth. I don't know, but I can't change those conversations. But I would hope that any engineering firm will, when they stake this property, is going to be staked correctly and not take up somebody else's property. And I think the one gentleman, when he was showing us that slide there, he's right next to lot 27. But on the new one, or the boulevard entryway, I believe, can you pop that up there? I mean, it's still there. I mean, it's not right up to where it is, but I think see that it's boxed out there. So has that issue been addressed? See how it's vacant there now? It's got that little, to the left, all the way to the left. That line, right, that property right there, that's about where this gentleman lives. Now flip over to your other one that he was referencing. And isn't that where that number 27 is? Isn't that same property line? 26, 27, 25? Yeah. No? Well, I just want to make certain that what is being stated is, I understand it.
This particular drawing, this is our west line, Greg, right here. So that's the property line right there. So if you go back to on the drawing you're looking at, we're not showing this dark line where the pond is.
Okay.
I see.
See, there's the pond here. So this lot would be right up against, this lot would be right up against his property line.
Okay.
Whereas the new layout, that would be more buffered right there. Do I have a couple minutes to answer some questions?
Actually, yeah, we should have gone ahead and given.
Well, that's what I was wondering. I know it sounded like new rules this evening I hadn't heard before, but that's okay. It was good conversation.
If there's no objection, it's fine at all.
Yeah, if I could, so going back to the beginning on this, trying to decide, okay, what makes sense for this particular property, right? The developer decided he was going to come in, they were going to come in and stick with the R2 zoning, right? It was very apparent from day one that we were not going to change zoning. That's a thing to do to get out. You're going to save huge wooded area. We were trying to balance out all those different items with a waiver here for one entrance. To be honest with you, is typically a waiver that's granted in most places. I hear the concerns. I understand what everybody's talking about. But if we do a boulevard entrance and we have fewer lots than what the ordinance says, this pretty standard operating procedure. We could have gone in, let me see if I can, and you can see the wooded area down here. We could have gone in and put more lots down here. Even though the DPW director does not like these two entrances, I'm not sure that this goes against anything that the current ordinance states. If we did something like that, we could come in and we could get additional lots down here at the entrance, or to submit a new plot. But I believe, I'm looking at staff here a little bit, I believe we could do that. We chose not to do that, to try to come up with what was the best use for this property, for this development, and for the neighborhood. So I just wanted to point that out. We felt like one drive, period. Did not want two drives. We proved that in the process we've gone through over the last 2 to 3 months. One drive, a waiver. DPW director said, I don't want two drives for the very reasons that Dan stated that we've been told. So that's why we feel like this is the best option for this particular piece of property. Just to go back to a couple other things, we have submitted things to the school, so I wanted to get that out there. We are conserving the trees. We did look at multiple, options. I've heard some that like the 2, some that like the 1. Personally, the 1 is the way to go. And then our surveyors, they do a great job. So I don't know what there's a lot of survey stakes that get planted that aren't always property corners. There's control points. There's points for, turning levels for your gun for surveying. I don't want to get into that. So I think that's a non-issue. We'll talk to the property owners if they have concerns, but I don't think that's an issue. It really gets down to 1 entrance, 2 entrances, a waiver and 61 lots, or no waiver, right? I mean, that's ultimately what it is. We feel like this is the best use of the property. We feel like this is a legitimate design. Somebody mentioned ethics. I hate when people start talking about that. We've done a lot of work in this community for a long time. We bring projects forward that we feel are good projects. We turn down a lot of people that request us to do work. We think this is a great project. I will leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Greg, in your report, you had a couple of comments in red that were probably pending answers. Have those been answered? Number 4, number 5.
To satisfaction of primary plat, yes.
Okay. Talked about that. I have a question. Is Kingsway relocating?
School is.
Thank you.
Is there any further discussion?
So to that point, Bill, and I may be getting into the weeds here. Then do we have any publicly available information as to what they're going to be doing with their athletic fields? Because then there may be an opportunity for, well, I guess no, because the easement, we can't do a stub road based because of the
Still the easement.
There's the easement. Okay, strike that.
There's
Answer my question.
the school and the church are separated, they're separate corporate entities. And the school is building a new building. Now, they haven't filed any development plans with the town. So we don't know the layout of the school site, but it'll be about half a mile to the west of this location on the north side of the street. There's another church that has a fairly large piece of property, but it's a fairly small church. And the school wants to buy a portion of that property for a new school location. And I presume that the conceptual drawing that I've seen has athletic fields on that property.
Copy. But they still couldn't, the developer here in this case couldn't do a stud road because of the stump road because of the easement to the east, correct?
Yeah, but that's very hypothetical.
Yeah.
I
Good.
mean, that's extremely hypothetical. And
I mean,
making a decision tonight based on something that may or may not happen is not,
There's no
that
reason
shouldn't
this
even be a
couldn't
factor.
be done.
Is there any further discussion? Well, does anybody want to make a motion? Does anybody want to make a motion? Mr. Taylor, your advice here? I'm not hearing a motion.
Make a motion that we approve MAPP 22-16 Countryside Estates primary plat.
Can I interject? Don't we need to do the waiver first? Sorry.
Do we have a proposed waiver?
I don't know. I didn't put a waiver motion form on there. I apologize.
Okay.
It can be as simple as, you do the waiver from the recent state in the statute.
I make a motion that we approve the waiver for the reasons stated as presented by the petitioner.
Do we have a second? If we don't have a second.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. Let's take a vote.
Catherine Ransberg,
4.
Paul Guckenberger,
Against.
Bill Reed,
Against?
Greg Zuzen,
4.
Mason Pike,
4.
Dave Kaufman,
Against.
Jennifer Spencer.
Against.
Motion does not pass. 4-3. 34.
So the waiver has not been approved. I guess I would present the petitioner with the opportunity to request a continuance if you would like to do so.
Well, the plat that's in front of you doesn't make a whole lot of sense right now, so I don't know, we've continued previously. Do we have any more continuances?
Mr. Taylor, where are we on that?
By right, they don't give you. Your other option is you could, with the waiver being declined, you could have a motion to deny.
And just so that we all understand was the petitioner's option if the petition is denied?
They could refile a plat with a different plan. Or they could not file anything if they wish. But
Could I consult with my client just a second?
They could request a continuance, right, Dan? And we could grant it.
I'd be willing to make a motion to continue this to allow the developer time to work with staff.
I think that's a good.
Well,
idea.
actually, I will make a motion to continue MAPP 22-16 Countryside Estates preliminary plat a future meeting to be determined by the staff and the petitioner.
Do you have a second?
I'll second it.
Catherine Ransberg,
4.
Paul Guckenberger,
For,
Bill Reed,
4.
Greg Zuzen.
Were we going to let our
I,
petitioner talk?
yeah,
to this
point of
audience?
order here. I thought I was talking to my client to.
Go ahead.
I think before a motion is made, I guess I have a question of staff. One, I think we have a couple options: ask for continuance, let the commission vote on before them, or if we withdraw. And I guess we're trying to figure out what those different options are. We'd hate to have a strike against the property.
the motion was to give you a continuance from the commission.
Okay,
You did
very
not have
good.
to ask for one.
Okay, very good. I didn't hear what the motion was, so we'll accept that motion.
No,
if
the
that's what
motion
you-
I made was to continue this to a time determined by you and staff, to allow you time to work with staff.
Okay,
So it's
very
kind of
good.
open-ended.
I appreciate that. I did not hear that.
Take that, Mrs. Starr.
Vote to continue. Catherine Ransberg,
4.
Paul Guckenberger,
For,
Bill Reed,
4.
Greg Zuzen,
4.
Mason Pike,
4.
Dave Kaufman,
4.
Jennifer Spencer. Motion carries.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Hopefully you'll be seeing us again.
Okay, and we move on to new business.
DPR 2301 Harvest Landing Lot 4, request for approval. Pardon me.
Can we ask everyone to please step outside with your conversations?
Request for approval of development plan petition to approve a new 7,000 square foot retail center with a waiver of section 2.102A of the Unified Development Ordinance to allow for fiber cement siding to be considered a masonry as it applies to the ordinance requirements for buildings in Tier 1 of the US Highway 36 overlay. It's about a 4 it's located in the vicinity of 8932 East US Highway 36. History on this property, there have been a couple variances, and this was the petition that I got confused earlier on in the development or in the meeting about. There were 2 variances that were reviewed by the Board of Zoning Appeals last Tuesday. One was for the number of rows in front of the building, between the building and US Highway 36. The ordinance limits it to 2 rows, and they propose 4. And then the front setback, the maximum front setback in the US 36 overlay district is 125 feet. And this one came in over that 125-foot requirement. Those were heard by the Board of Zoning Appeals last week and approved. This is the site right down here. It's lot 4 in the Harvest Landing subdivision. This Costco's up here, Fuel Center. I believe that's the Raising Cane's, I believe. And then lot 7 over here and Bubba's 33 over here. As I indicated, this is a request for about a 7,000 square foot building to be used as a multi-tenant retail center in the Harvest Landing commercial development. It does include a waiver of the provisions of the Unified Development Ordinance that require a specified part of the facade to be in masonry material. And the reason it needs that waiver is that the definition of masonry material excludes fiber cement siding. And so while the site is clad in essentially 100% masonry, for a lack of a better term, because the definition of masonry material excludes fiber cement siding. It's well under the 80% that's required by ordinance.
What is the masonry material? Is it brick or is it hardy
It's,
board?
it's a combination of brick and hardy board, fiber cement siding.
So if I had to categorize them, brick being one, hardy board being two, this fiber cement is three.
Right. Yeah.
All right.
Now, the vast majority of this development is consistent with the requirements of the ordinance. The three issues that it has is the maximum setback, the number of rows of parking in front of it between the building and 36, and the masonry requirements of the 36 overlay. The two development standards that the parking and setback have already been taken care of by the Board of Zoning Appeals last week. And so we're only dealing here with the one waiver deal that would allow them to utilize fiber cement siding. This retail center is very similar to the retail center that's constructed on lot 7 right now, which is a very attractive building and it's durable. And obviously the requirement to construct these structures out of masonry is so that they have not only a very attractive facade on the initial construction period, but that facade is durable and that durability lasts in time so that it'll maintain an attractive facade. Sometimes when you're using elements like ephes or other sorts of things, the facade degrades fairly quickly. As many of the commission are aware, Lot 7 originally came through with a waiver, and the waiver was to use a wood product, and that the commission did approve that waiver, and then the petitioner in that particular case submitted an administrative change to give the wood, to use fiber cement siding, to give the appearance of the wood siding, but not actually have the wood. The commission had a lot of concern in Lot 7 about the durability and the long-term appearance of using wood on the building. And I think the petitioner at that time heard those concerns and then decided to go with that fiber cement look. And Lot 7 really is an attractive building, and we actually get a lot of comments on that building from people.
What is Lot 7 building?
Lot 7 is the one that has chicken salad chicks, and it's going to have a
Cookie.
breakfast
Lou
restaurant, and Lou Malnati's and those buildings right there.
And that's fiber cement board?
Yeah, the brown wood look is fiber cement siding now instead of the wood. Originally, they proposed a wood panel, and the Plan Commission had a lot of discussion about using wood on there. And then when they came and wanted to substitute fiber cement for the wood, I administratively approved that because I think it was consistent with what the debate that the Plan Commission had when they approved the waiver for the wood siding. This is the layout of the site, building right here, landscaping around. And this is how the building would appear. I don't have color renderings of the site. This was what I had, but it is substantially similar to the building on Lot 7. It looks almost identical to it, other than it's being smaller. We do recommend approval of the waiver request. And we do recommend approval of this DPR, subject to the 3 conditions outlined in our staff report and shown up there on that slide. And I would be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Is remind me, the definition of masonry, is that in our UDO? Is that elsewhere?
It's in chapter 10 of the UDO.
Okay, thank you. And is there a reason why fiber cement siding was not considered
I
to be
think,
masonry?
yeah, I recall some debate on that definition. It may have been a debate at the council level. And I think they wanted more control on the use of fiber cement siding. Masonry material, brick, limestone, natural stone, manufactured stone, or a combination of these materials bonded together with mortar to form a wall, buttress, or similar mass. For the purpose of this ordinance, thin stone veneer, thin brick veneer, and fiber cement siding are not masonry materials. So that's the definition of
Okay.
masonry materials that's in the UDO.
Okay.
And I believe that either the council or the plan commission wanted a little bit of control over the use of thin stone, thin brick, and fiber cement siding in the overlay.
So are there times when staff would recommend against fiber cement?
Well, it's case by case. I mean, my general feel is that the idea behind having a durable material and fiber cement siding is a fairly durable material, and the paint or the coloring tends to adhere to fiber cement siding better than it does in others because of the shrink swell doesn't occur. I mean, normally when you get chipping on or paint degrading on siding, it's because of the siding's shrinking and swelling because of the temperature differentials that we have here. And so, I mean, we would recommend a waiver. We would tend to fall on the positive side of a waiver of fiber cement siding unless it really looks bad, you know.
Do you recall what the other side of the debate was? I'm just kind of wondering why. I just, if it was debated and then it was specified this way, it makes me hesitant.
I don't recall it. I basically remember when we talked about the definition of masonry material, we hadn't, as a matter of policy, considered fiber cement siding as a masonry material. I think the way it was written, I think the way it was done prior to the adoption of the UDO is that the ordinance said something brick, stone, or other material approved by the plan commission. The plan commission never overtly approved fiber cement siding, so it wasn't considered a masonry material. And so because it had never been approved by the plan commission, we specifically excluded it in the definition of masonry material to give the plan commission the authority on a case-by-case basis to review and approve it if they wanted to. But I think, and this is sort of off the cuff, I think that in the other ordinance, it was brick, stone, and other thing as approved by the plan commission, and the plan commission just simply never approved masonry, fiber cement as an alternate material to be considered masonry.
Thank you.
Bill, didn't we, on lot 7, wasn't the wood and placed by the fire cement board, that was one of the materials? There is masonry on those buildings other than fiber cement board?
Yeah, but they didn't meet the 80% requirement.
Right.
Right. There's brick. There's brick, and they have, I think, 3 colors, including the brown for the wood, and I want to say it's a white or a gray for the building.
Whereas it looks like the petitioner here is looking for all cement board.
A lot. I thought that there was some brick on here. I didn't think it was all cement board. I guess the petitioner, when I reviewed it, I thought it was very similar to, I thought it was very similar to the lot 7 building.
Okay, I'll hold that question.
Yeah.
For the petitioner.
What's the timing? I know we changed from our building and zoning and made a lot of changes to the UDO, and we created the UDO because we didn't want to keep approving waivers. And so now we're back to this. So I didn't know if the one that we're comparing it to was pre-UDO. Okay, it makes sense. And you did an administrative approval from an upgrade, which makes sense. So now we're post UDO and we want to create more waivers. I mean, it just, to me, it doesn't make sense. We all spent a lot of time, and I hate to position these 1, 2, and 3, and I've added 4 for wood siding, and now we're going from 4 to 3. Well, why don't we go from 1 to 2?
Well, I think it's just proves the point that no matter how carefully planned, there's always going to be circumstances where a waiver may be appropriate. I'm not saying this is necessarily one of them, but
Right, and we don't know what percentage is.
Right.
Of brick to cement board to hardy board, or, and what is the ordinance to that as well?
any further questions for staff? Okay, invite the petitioner to come forward.
Dylan Reynolds, civil engineer with Space Co. on the project. Our office is 3850 Priority Way, South Drive, Indianapolis. In response to the architectural elevations, unfortunately, the architect engineer, but I do know the intent is to be substantially similar, if not exactly the same as Lot 7. It's the same architect on the project, same developer, so that is the intent. As far as further elaboration of the project, I think staff did a pretty good job explaining the overall intention of the project.
You don't have a view to give us a better idea of the percentages of masonry versus?
Just the elevations that were provided in the staff report.
So going by that, I mean, looking at it, unless you can indicate where there might be something in cement board, it looks like it's all fiber cement board. That were
Yellow.
page here, because I don't see any materials.
So possible idea is if we get the add a condition saying that if we wanted to approve it on condition that it meets the same percentages as outlined or approved in Lot 7. I don't know, Dan, if that is, make that action in a motion, but we could. So, yeah, it should have been included. It would have been helpful if it was included. But if we feel comfortable with what was done with Lot 7, then we
Which is a
could.
done deal.
Which is a done deal. It's built. It's there to be seen.
And we like it.
We could make a motion that it's on condition that the percentages are the same.
And I'm just going to take a lucky guess and say, when you look at the construction standards that are in our packet from the town of Avon, they're from October of 2017. So I'm going to say that was pre-UDO because there's about 7 or 8 names on there that aren't even around here anymore.
I don't have any questions for the petitioner.
Any further questions for the petitioner?
No.
I would have liked to have had more information about the percentage of, I mean, I'm sure you mean what you say, but having an architect, saying, I know it is that person's intention to do what they did on Lot 7. I don't know if there's any exceptions to the hearsay rule for that. Are there, Dan?
Relax the rules,
Yeah, and I understand the concern. So if it was something to approve conditionally, like Mr. Pyatt said, that we would be open to that as well.
I would say that it's nice if a petitioner comes in and asks for a waiver for alternate materials, to be able to see those materials. We've had petitioners do that before, especially when they're deviating from Tier 1 design standards, to show what they're building with, so that it's like either equal to or exceeds our ordinances.
You also do have the option of continuance. Throwing that out.
So I mean, that would be a question to you, that one is continuance to come back to material, or two, no objections to us adding that as a condition that you comply with the same ratio of building materials that was done with Site 7. So
But Greg brings up a good point. Site 7 was approved before the current UDO. Would Site 7 be approved today under the new UDO?
I still would have required I mean, that required a waiver. So lot 7 did get a waiver for the same thing.
With the current UDO as well, though, correct?
With the current UDO?
Or was it the old one?
It was the previous previous ordinance.
And it got a waiver for wood and then it was.
Right, you got a waiver to use wood, because a significant portion of the facade was in wood.
And then you did an
And then-
administrative change.
Right, we changed it, the plan commission approved that waiver, and then they came back and changed it to Nichia, which is what they propose here, which is a fiber cement product. And these, I don't know the specific, the front facade is the Nichia, the side facades are probably about 70% brick.
Yeah.
So there is brick on the side facades and the rear facade.
So I guess the question is of the UDO ordinance, is the intent for it to look like masonry or is the intent for it to look like wood? Because a fiber cement is intended to look like wood.
Yeah.
So what's the intent of the ordinance?
I think the intent of the ordinance is for there to be it's difficult to say the way it's written. I think that ideally what the plan commission historically has wanted were brick and stone.
That's what I thought.
Because originally in the ordinance, it was brick and stone or some other material that's been approved by the plan commission.
Yeah.
Which led to a number of waivers. Now, what we did was say it's 80% masonry, and then we defined masonry by excluding some things that are generally held as masonry material.
I mean, that would be like.
Because wood would not be considered masonry and fiber cement is intended to replicate wood.
Yeah, right. It's looking like wood. It's like hardy board would be a type of fiber cement on the
Right,
house.
it is.
That's a equivalent. So do we want our buildings to look like brick and, concrete, or do we want to look like wood? That's the question. I'm a little bit hesitant to say I would want it to look like wood in a very large percentage, in a small percentage. That might be okay.
Instead of guessing and speculating, maybe the right thing is just to ask for a continuance and bring the real data. So, okay, well, you said that. Well, I thought you said that.
I agree.
I agree. I think we need more information, more details.
But that's up to you. I'm just.
Or we can make a motion on our own. Correct.
Sure. Technically open it to public hearing.
Any further questions for the petitioner? Anybody in the audience who would like to ask questions or make statements? Okay. Public hearing. Does anybody want to make a motion or a request of the commission?
I would like to request a continuance to the next hearing, and we can bring back more specific data on the architectural details.
I think that sounds grand. Do we need an approval on that or just? Yes. Okay, let's.
I make a motion that we continue DPR 23-01 Harvest Landing Lot 4 Development Plan.
I'll second it.
Take a vote.
Catherine Ransberg,
4.
Paul Guggenberger,
4.
Bill Reed,
4.
Greg Zuzen,
4.
Mason Pipe,
4.
Dave Kaufman,
4.
Jennifer Spencer.
4.
Motion carries 7-0.
Okay. Moving on to
Thank you.
2023
Thanks.
training session. Dan, are we doing this as part of the meeting? Okay.
You've all had a long night, so I will be efficient in my time. Your training materials, I have a lot for you. I'm not going to go over each of it. Going to highlight some things for you and let you read it on your own. But I do think it's important for me to provide to you as much information as possible so that you can study and be as good as you can be. So if you will turn with me to page 4, you will, we're going to start with conflicts of interest. And just a quick reminder that you may not participate in decisions where you have a indirect or direct pecuniary interest or monetary interest. The procedure is a little tricky, but the procedure is that if that occurs and you do have a financial interest in a case, you're supposed to advise Bill before the meeting that you do, and then you will not participate. And then we will literally kick you out. So you aren't making faces or giving secret signals to the other members of the Plan Commission. We'll kick you out over there, bring you back in when the case is over. And there's at least a perception of integrity in our system that you didn't influence anybody if you were disqualified. And then that also will be entered on the record. If you turn the page, then it talks about bias, prejudice, and other. And this gets down to the other legal disqualification reason, and that is that you can't be impartial. Now, it's no crime to not be impartial. It could be your brother, could be your best friend, it could be someone that you know very well who is the petitioner or a remonstrator. It works both ways. And if you feel like that your relationship with someone in the case makes it impossible for you to be impartial, then you should disqualify yourself. It's really simple. It's not like you did anything bad. It just happens. And so, but the key is whether or not you can be impartial. So sometimes I get the questions about, well, I know that guy, who's the petitioner, or I know one of the remonstrators very well. That's okay that you know them. The question is, can you be impartial? Can you do your job? Or is your relationship with them so strong that you're going to agree with your friend regardless of what they say? And so if you don't feel like you can be impartial, then my recommendation is to disqualify yourself. If you believe it'd be difficult for you, disqualify yourself. It's not like a bad thing if you step aside for that one case. It's not a big deal. And so, but I'd recommend you do that. There is a case, the Burton case, which is where it was a BZA case in Madison County involving the wind farms, and a remonstrator said to the chairwoman, you shouldn't be participating in this because you're friends with one of the petitioners. And the chair said, well, I'm friends with some other remonstrators too. And I go to church with people on both sides of the issue, but I think I can be impartial. And that case got appealed, and the court said, look, just knowing someone or being friends with them alone is not enough. It is, I'm friends with them, and I'm not impartial. I'm not impartial. And so that's what that's about. I think that's kind of a personal thing. I still lean toward, I think if you don't know, then get out of the case. That's better than staying in and saying later, I should have got out. And with that, we have to do the same thing as conflict of interest. Should notify Bill in advance. We'll make it part of the record and we'll kick you out. And then we'll come back and get you though, when the next case comes up. Now, one of the things is you'll see in the Perryworth case on page 5, that sometimes the question comes up, well, do I have a pecuniary interest or don't I? So in this case, in Boone County, one of the members of the commission, his wife didn't own the land that was the subject of the case. She owned a 1/5 interest in the lot next to it. So people might say, well, that decision may impact that land next to it, or is that a pecuniary interest? The court said, no, that's really not what we mean. We mean, really, are you going to make money if this gets approved on the property that's involved? So they drew a line saying that's a little too remote. That's not what we mean. That's not what the legislature means. And so that's a case that gives us some guidance. If you'll turn to page 6, at the bottom of the page, just a little reminder, and you guys have done a great job last couple of years of really understanding the difference between what is discretionary and what is non-discretionary. So disposals are rezones, PUDs, and text amendments. And again, non-discretionary or plats and DPRs. And you guys have done great. So, and remind you top of page 7, case, and you had those tonight. Plats that are non-conforming, they're asking for a waiver. Aha, I remember Dan said, if they're asking for a waiver, now we have some discretion because we have discretion over the waiver, even though the plat itself would be non-discretionary if it were compliant. Same with DPRs with waiver requests. Again, then you have some discretion in a non-discretionary case. So keep that in mind. I found it interesting. The one remonstrator was quoting the sections, what you should be considering, and he was in the wrong section. He was in the variance section. And the waivers, the only, it was in your case report, there are only 2 factors, and you don't have to have practical difficulty or undue hardship because there's more in there. And basically, your new UDO is written to say, essentially, you can grant a waiver if you just think it furthers the interest of the town's built environment. That's really what it means. If you think it's a good idea and it would be better, okay, then that's when you grant waivers. I always think this is important. In my view, when do you grant a waiver? When you think the alternate proposed is better. Okay, that's what, and you guys did a good job discussing what that meant tonight. And I thought your deliberation was good. But my rule is the waiver better? Is it a better result for the town? Is that building going to look better or is this going to be better? And, sometimes petitioners will say to you, well, we have not met your landscape ordinance. But what we are proposing, we think is better and more exciting, and because we're doing this and this. That's what you're looking for in a waiver. And I thought you guys, generally, I think you do a good job with waivers, but I just think I would articulate a little differently. I also just want to point out that whenever a remonstrator starts standing up and telling you you're not following the rules, and I know that you are, then I want to make sure to tell you you're right. So, okay, the middle of page 7, rezone, really important. Zone's the most important case you'll have, and it's where you have the most discretion. So just a couple of pointers. There are 5 factors, and I've got them right there in the middle of the page for you. You hear them all the time, but boy, it's good to see them all in one place. And you know that no single criteria controls. It's all of them taken together. In which way do the scales lean? Yes or no? And you're the judge of that. I say that because in the first 40 years of jurisprudence on rezone cases, they kind of thought, hey, if it's not consistent with the comp plan, you can't approve it. And then the courts came along and they said, no. In this Borsig case at the bottom of page 7, they said, no, that's not really true. The job is to view all 5 factors in their totality. That means that there is no veto card in these 5 criteria. Okay, it could be against the comp plan, and Bill in one of his staff reports today said this is not what the comp plan says, but actually this is historically what this area has been used for, commercial, and so he supported that. And that's a perfect example of evaluating that criteria. Our comp plans, sometimes they're new, sometimes they're 7 years old. Okay, in this community where things grow, we've had fast growth and things change so much. Sometimes the comp plan isn't the right answer. Okay, sometimes it's not. But none of these 5 factors weigh any more than the others, so just keep that in mind. The other thing to remember is that if you ever had someone challenge a discretionary review of your part, they're going to look at, did you make findings? And did you have facts which supported your decisions? And again, I think you guys have in the last 12 months done a really good job of this, but the way you make findings is ask questions. Now, Paul asked a couple of questions tonight. I was over there silently chewing because I could see where he's going with, I thought, I know what his motion is going to be or his position, because he's starting to ask questions to build facts that are going to support what he might do. And he's had to sit through lots of my training, so I was proud of you. But that's exactly the best way to make findings, is to ask questions of the staff, which you were what I call a hot panel tonight, pretty active, asking lots of questions. That's good. You're asking questions of staff, and that's what we're building the fact lines so that you could say, did you guys consider the 5 factors? We really did. Did you listen to the tape? We even argued a bit. We disagreed. We talked. We deliberated. We talked about the definition of masonry. We did all those things. Okay. When you guys are doing that, you're doing your job right. So just a nice reminder there of how important findings are. Really, really important. And I'm going to talk about this in one of the new cases, just to come back to this later. Planned unit developments, I'm not going to talk a lot about this year because I think you guys do great. I just will remind you of where I see some of our more sophisticated plan commissions, just be cautious. Here's why. When we have a planned unit development, we are allowing the petitioner to write their own UDO. Okay? I can't emphasize how important this is. We are giving them blank paper and saying, no, we've got this UDO, Mr. Peebles carries around, it's 586 pages, whatever it is. No, never mind that. You just write what you want. Well, now, if we're going to do that, we should be reviewing that very carefully, and your staff will, but we need to review it carefully and make sure that we agree to everything that's in there. If there are things in there you don't want, we should strike those things. And it's not just standards. It may be used, how big the overhangs on the building are, but it could also be what is the process by which things get changed in here later. Some planning unit developments have processes that are different than our processes. Well, they're writing their own ordinance so that they can do that. So we need to be really careful. So I would invite you, read those things. Make sure that you don't have any serious heartburn over one of the things that they might be proposing. You could never be too careful. Let me ask you now to go to page 14 with me. I'm sorry, 13 with me. No, I really want to go to page 14. I really am. Waivers. I have a whole page of waivers here. I'm just going to say, well, it's kind of timely because we just had 2 long waiver cases. But remember, we can only make waivers, and I said this earlier, we can only make waivers where the UDO says we can make waivers.
Did you say 14 or 12? Waivers
I'm
on
sorry,
page 12.
I'm on page 12. You're right. I'm sorry. You're right. So the reason that's important is, and we got into this tonight, if our ordinance, if our town council really didn't want us to deviate from something, they don't have to let you have a waiver right. They could just say, if you want to really not follow ordinance, you can go get a variance from the BZA. And that's where you have to go. And boy, good luck, because that's tough. And even if you can satisfy all the criteria for a variance, the BZA still doesn't have to grant it. It's discretionary. Okay? Tough to get a variance. Not as hard to get a waiver. So why do we have these 2 things? Well, we have the things because when the UDO says you can grant a waiver in your discretion, it's a signal that that's okay if you're satisfied. Doesn't mean you have to, but it's okay. So when somebody asks for a variance, that's because the UDA says no. These 2 things are not the same. This is not the same at all. They're not at all the same. And again, I'm not sure that everyone understands that. The public, I think you guys get it, but it's such an important distinction to make. And a couple of you serve on the BZA, so you get to do both these things, but we only do waivers. So if it says, look at the criteria in the UDO for a waiver, and let's focus in on that and see whether it's better. Going to come right back to that. Now, if you go to page 13, there's a lot of information about open door law, which I do think is important. And I'd like you to review, but the key thing is, a majority of you can't get together and talk about these cases. You cannot. Okay, minority of you can. That's not a meeting, so you can do that. But again, it's a different rule in the BZA for you BZA guys. You can't talk to each other at all, but Plan Commission, once 4 of you get in a room, then I start paying attention. So if it's after a meeting and there are 4 of you, then I'm going to usher one of you away because that looks like a meeting, right? I've done it before. I've said, hey, one of you got to leave. Greg knows, right, Greg? Sometimes I'll say to the town council, hey, that's a majority. Please, someone go away. Now, email is not a meeting. The public access counselor says unless it becomes 2 problems. One, if it becomes a chat, well, now that's pretty simultaneous. That's a meeting. You can't do that. And you can't send an email to everybody and say, how are you guys going to vote on this? You cannot do that. That's prejudging a case. That's talking about the case. You can't do that. And the other thing I'll mention is, even though email just like, hey, remember we've got a meeting, or one of you send an email to the other, did you see that application? I'm not sure I understand what masonry is. Do you know anything about that? That's okay. But remember, if you're sending email to other or to staff about town business, that's a public record. So ask these bills sent to Greg about town business and you get them all. So I always say this, if you're going to write an email to someone other than me, because you can say anything you want to me and ask me for legal advice and nobody knows. Nobody's ever going to see that. But to someone else, if you wouldn't tape it to the front door of the building, then don't say it in an email because it's a public document. And same thing for text messages. And if you don't believe me, then I produced 11,000 text messages the other day. One of Greg's friends who doesn't follow my advice and just uses his text messaging a lot. I really urge caution. Rather than text, why don't you just pick up the phone and call someone? And it's a lot safer from an Access to Public Records Act standpoint. Okay, on page 14, at the bottom, you'll see a section on our LUPA, the Religious Land Use Act. And again, the rule there is we just can't treat religious organizations any different than we treat a commercial business. Don't ask questions about their religion. You are also what I call an inquisitive board. You ask questions like, when is it going to be done? Who's your tenant going to be? Okay, we don't want to say, I'm Baptist, so I can say this. We don't want to say, now look, I'm Baptist. Do you actually submerge people when you baptize them? Are you sprinklers? It's a very big issue to we Baptists. We really believe you have to go under the water. So we don't want to get into that, right? Now we all laugh, but those are facts from a case. I am Baptist, by the way. But those are facts from a case. Another one is the county commissioner who did not like mega churches because he went to a really small church out in Colorado, and he told his buddies at coffee, there are people who go to coffee every morning. Their buddies, apparently they're retired, be my guess. But anyway, he told all his buddies, I'm never going to approve mega church because it would be the death of every small church in this county, Boulder County, Colorado. Well, of course, he voted against it and it failed and the church sued. And when that clever attorney started deposing the commissioner, he said, did you ever talk to anybody about this case? He said, well, no, and my buddies at coffee. And the lawyer did what any lawyer would do. And what are their names? And they deposed the 5 buddies from coffee. Did he ever talk about it? Oh, yeah. What did he say? Oh, that thing. I'll be the death of all churches. How big is the church? About 17 people. Okay. So you got to be careful. Be careful about this. We don't want to talk about to us. It might as well be a library. We don't care about what's going on inside. Okay, and that's federal law. Now, if you will go over me to some other pages, not page 14. If you go over with me way back to page 20. No, I'm sorry, page 19. One of my recommendations to all my plan commissions is make the petitioner do their job. You guys did a good job of that tonight. Okay, but if you have a rezone, make the petitioner tell you how all 5 of the criteria are satisfied. And I've written down some questions that you could ask. And these are good questions. Part of these, but so how do you approach that? Why do you have to do all the hard work? Okay, why do you have to figure it out? So if it's inconsistent with a comp plan, ask them, why is this proposed rezone in the best interest of the town? It's not consistent with our comp plan, what we say. So you tell me, and this is the you tell me section. And I don't think you guys should have to work so hard and have to extract all this information. Make them tell you. Ask good questions and make them present their case. Page 20. Number 11 under my best advice is public comment, how to handle it. Now here's my best and sincere advice about this is do not engage the public. It's their right under your rules to make a comment. And just in the same vein as I don't want them cross-examining you or our staff, you shouldn't ask them questions or don't engage them. Don't start a conversation with them. Here's the way it's supposed to work. Mr. Smith, would you like to make a public comment? Yes, I would. Blah, 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 blah. Thank you. Who's next? That's fine. We'll move on. Okay. Because if you engage the audience, sometimes if they're really smart, and some of them are, they'll take over your meeting. And Catherine will be trying to stop them, and they'll just keep talking. And you'll be polite at first, and then later you won't be polite. It won't matter because they're standing at the podium and they will own your meeting. Okay? So now we're not supposed to do that. That rarely happens the first time, but once any of you ask them something, which you're not going to do, okay, is they feel the conversation. It's like a talk show. They're going to stay. Hey, this is going to be great. I was only going to talk for 5 minutes, but now Mr. Guckenberg is like, we have something going on, and I'm going to see where this relationship goes. That's not in our best interest. Okay? Thank you. Sit down. Let's move on. Okay, now at the bottom of page 20, I'm going to challenge you with some more advanced issues. So I want to talk to you a minute about vested rights. And Bill touched on it, but he just didn't call it that tonight. So vested rights. The whole concept here is there may be times when you hear Bill or myself use this phrase, and I want you to know what it means and what it is. So developers have long advocated that there comes a certain point in the development process where they've spent enough money that they have something you can't take away from them, that they have a vested property right. And this argument is based on the 14th Amendment of the federal Constitution, and also the state Constitution, which says government. It doesn't say the government can't take your property. It's not what it says. It says the government can't take your property without just compensation. Okay, so in the regulation of development, whether it be or even one of our rules, if we cannot infringe upon a vested property right. Can we infringe upon unvested property rights? Oh yeah, we sure can. So developers say that when we on their rights, we commit, is the word they use, inverse condemnation. Which, they should say fake condemnation, because it's not really condemnation. That's when we file suit against someone to take their land for a road. So developers have nationally made these arguments that there is this tipping point where they suddenly have rights, and it's when they've spent enough money. If you go to page 21, our federal courts have never quite bought that. Our federal courts have said, well, let's think about that. I'm going to come back to what they say. So what do we say? What do municipalities say? If you were to hang out with Bill and Ian, and if you haven't, I recommend you do, because they're fun guys. But if you hung out with them, you would hear them use a word sometimes, entitlement. We, from our side of the table, we think you don't have property rights until you have an entitlement. And an entitlement could be R2 zoning, and I want to build R2. Now, that's an entitlement. There's nothing we can do about that. Can't stop them. Or it could be a building permit. Okay, but we generally, on our side of the table, we think, well, when do you have a right? When you have a permit, right? Is that what you guys think, right? That's the position government's always said. Well, you can see when you get a permit compared to what the developers say, these are two very different things. Federal courts have said there has to be somewhere in between spending all this money. Maybe you don't have to get all the way to the permit. Maybe there's something in the middle, but they never defined it very well. Indiana with section 1109. And 1109, which is what Bill articulated, oh yeah, they get this law for 3 years, they have to finish in 10. That's section 1109, and it says, when do you get vested rights in Indiana? When you apply for a permit. When you apply. Very good, you notice that. Not when you get a permit, when you apply. So we were over here at entitlement, they were over here somewhere as soon as I spend $1 or $100 or whatever. And in section 1109, our state legislature said, it's not when you get a permit, it's when you apply. When you submit a complete application. You can't, it's when you really apply and provide all the information. The problem is how they define permit. Because in that section, as you can see there under D, the way they define it is not how it's not the way I would think of it. It is a building permit, an improvement location permit, a certificate of occupancy, all those things sound like permits. But development plan doesn't sound like a permit to me, but that's how it's defined. A secondary plat, primary plat, that doesn't sound like a permit either. Special exception, who knew? I never thought of that as a permit. No, these would all come before. You get your special exception long before you get your permit. You do your development plan, that then, your development plan approved, for example, allows you then to apply for a permit, okay? And then plan your development. No idea how they got in there. No idea. So when they say when you apply for a permit, it's all these things. And this comes into play, I had this come up this summer in the jurisdiction because there was big talk of a new section of the ordinance, and it was going to restrict residential development in a particular area. And the lawyer for the developer was smart. He knew section 1109. Not everybody does. And he went and applied for a plat, primary plat, and he beat him right there. He beat him. He beat the town, see, because he filed that. Now, when I was in federal court with this issue a couple years ago, the other attorneys who were on my case with me, when I mentioned 1109, they didn't know what I was talking about. That's when I decided I've got to start putting this in my training. You guys need to know what this vested right thing is all about. Okay, HOAs. Briefly, HOA covenants are none of our business. You will hear, my guys, you got them violate our covenant. The courts in have said that's outside the purview of the BZA and the Plan Commission. So that's not what we do. Okay, those are private rights. We don't do that. Now, if you'll turn back to 26, I'm just going to tell you about a couple new cases, and then you can go home, as far as I'm concerned. First on 26, a really big case, number 13, the city of Austin. And this was a United States Supreme Court case, which kind of really surprised us because in 2015, the United States Supreme Court decided Reed versus Town of Gilbert, which is out of a little town in Arizona, where they told a pastor that he couldn't put sign on telepoles or anywhere else for that matter, because it didn't meet their rules for religious signs. And the Supreme Court really didn't like that. You have a classification for religious signs. Well, it can't be constitutional because it sounds like you're targeting speech. It sounds like you're regulating signs by the type of signs they are. And everyone latched onto one sentence in the Reed case, which says, if someone who's regulating signs has to read the sign in order to know what to do next, it's not content neutral, and therefore it has to survive. And one survives scrutiny, by the way. Those people lose. And so that was a case in Reed. And so as a reaction to Reed in 2015, 16, 17, every jurisdiction across the country that I'm aware of all amended their sign regulations dramatically and got rid of any references to what kind of sign it was. And that's what we all thought. And then along comes Austin, and Austin is an electronic billboard case out of the Austin, Texas, near the airport. And they wanted to digitize their billboards so that all of us could watch the news on our way in. If you've been to some cities, Washington DC is one, all along your drive to work, you can watch the morning news. You just turn your radio and there's just billboard after billboard after billboard. And Austin didn't want that near the airport. They did not want all that television on their billboard. So they banned all outdoor signs. No more outdoor signs. Existing signs could stay. They'd be grandfathered. You couldn't change them, but they could stay, but no more new signs. And the billboard industry got together and challenged this and said, it seems to me that now you're talking about you have to read the sign in order to regulate it. The Supreme Court, a win for the good guys, said, no, that's not content-based. All Bill has to do as the code enforcement guy, all he has to do is go to the billboard, look up, see being advertised, and if that product is not being sold right underneath the billboard, apparently, that's an off-premise sign. That's not content-based. Bill doesn't care what they're selling. It's location-based. And the Supreme Court said, we've always said you guys could do that. We've always said time, place, size, lighting. We've always said you could do that. Why don't you understand that? The billboard company's reading of Reed is too extreme, they said. That just because you have to read it to figure out its location, doesn't always mean it's not content neutral. In fact, they found this to be content neutral. It was not location neutral, and they upheld this. And this is going to cause us to think a little more about about what our sign would say. I think it's really a big decision. Right under there, Becerra, which is out of Brownsburg, is a really good case because in that case, it was a memorandum decision, which means I cannot cite it in a brief as authority, but I can use it in training. And since it's right up the road, I thought it'd be a good one to mention to you. And in that case, the remonstrators appealed a rezone, which is really unusual. Remonstrators don't appeal much. So this is really unusual. They appealed a rezone, and in looking at that case, the court said something interesting. The court gets the record, the recording of the meeting, the minutes, the case reports, all this. The court said, my gosh, how could you say they made their decision arbitrary? Did you see that wonderful case report? Golly, it was like 7 pages long and it outlined everything and what the issues were and what the facts were and told the Plan Commission and the council what the issues were. And then the most amazing thing happened. They talked about the case report. They did something else crazy. They asked questions of the petitioner, and then they talked about that. And finally, somebody made a motion, and it would appear to me that it was a very well thought out decision. And we're not going to get into whether, they're right. All we're going to say is, were they rational, and did they have reasons? See, the courts don't look at whether you're right or wrong. They're saying, look, if they just did their job, if they just do, Dan's talked about this at trading forever. If you would just do what Dan said, right? This case is just a perfect case where they say, look, just look at the 5 factors. Talk about all 5. It's okay to say, you did this a couple times tonight. I think this is great. I don't think I'm going to support this because of this. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Be deliberative. Ask questions. Get the facts. And in this case, they support a very unpopular rezone where there were hundreds of people against it because they said, look, we can't find what they did to be arbitrary and capricious. It looked like they did exactly what we'd want them to do. Number 15, the Maryville BZA case. I know it's a BZA case, but bear with me because the point is good. And I've heard this everywhere I go. This case, the remonstrator got up and he made the very familiar argument, and it was something like this. You people don't understand. This is a self-storage business that is being proposed. I own a self-storage business right down the road. Do you know what you're going to do to my business? I mean, what about us existing guys? We were here first, and you just if you're just going to approve self-storage after self-storage, what are you going to do to our local economy? We're oversaturated. And the Court of Appeals said, that's all fine and well, but it is not your job to eliminate competition. Okay. And I always say it this way, we don't pick winners and losers. We, the Plan Commission, Town Council, BZA, we're not in that business. Okay. It's not who got there first. We're going to make our decisions regardless of this. In fact, the Court of Appeals went so far as to say, competition is a good thing. It lowers prices. It lowers prices. Sorry? Cannot say no more chain restaurants. No. Can't say no more car dealerships, no more restaurants, no more. We can't say anything. Okay, and then page 27, Mammoth Solar. This was also a really large case last year. And this, as you might gather, to a regular project, more than 10,000 acres in Pulaski County. And that's not the important part of the case. The important part of the case was this. Pulaski County, there were 7 things that needed to be submitted to the staff at the time of the application, in this case, for a special exception. Now, the planner, for reasons I don't know, went to a meeting with Mammoth Solar, and Mammoth Solar said, look, I have all 7 things. I've got 5 of the 7. Is that okay? And the planner said, you've given me enough. Will you give me what I need? And they went on. The case moved to the BZA. Case was heard. Nobody at BZA seemed to be concerned that of the categories that were supposed to be submitted, that some of those things weren't submitted. So like in your cases, imagine that a traffic study is required and it wasn't submitted, and the staff says, well, I know a traffic study was required here, but I just waived it. This is kind of what happened here. So then they get to the public hearing, and one remonstrator stands up and says, I object to the fact that I have to come up here and talk about this project when not everything that is required to be submitted was submitted. And what that has done, I'm not talking about you have to follow your rules. What I'm talking about is, and this is an ingenious argument, how can I, as a citizen, prepare for these hearings if I don't have access to the information your town council said was required? You're depriving me, who knows why? Who knows why it wasn't required? But the staff and the BZA, you guys are depriving me of my right as a citizen to thoughtfully consider and participate in democracy. You can just imagine a patriotic song playing in the background. But the court said he's exactly right. He's exactly right. And this was a huge case in the planning world and in the green energy world, as you would imagine. They sent it back. Sent this case back. I don't know I'll watch it. I'm going to watch it and see what happens. But that high stakes, gazillions of dollars, that case got sent back because neither the staff or the BZA kind of held petitioner's feet to fire. And then for reasons no one would have anticipated, it got reversed. On the last 2 pages, I've given you some open door law cases. First time I've done this. I just need to begin to get a flavor for these. So you can read them on your own. And the same thing for Access to Public Records Act cases. Again, just to kind of see what I would be happy to answer any questions. Thank We can flag a case and get a notification. Yeah, we don't get notified of every case, but we can track those. And I want to know, I want to know what happens when it goes back to the BZA, and that's not widely reported. That this case is not going to go back to the BZA where they're going to have another hearing on a special exception. And so I don't know if Buckeye County streams meetings, but I want to know what's happened. So we put a call into their county attorney, and I want to know what happens. And then my guess is it might be appealed again based upon the actual merits of the case, because see, this really wasn't and the merit appeal on a procedural due process sort of thing. So we'll see. But this is the Pulaski County case is the largest one site project that they know of in Indiana. It started out as like 8,000 acres. The time it came to play, it was 12,000 acres. And the development was 12 to 15,000 acres. That's really large, even for solar farms. That's really large. So, yeah, I will let you guys know. I'll tell you. I'll let you know. And then again, I think I'll be very interested to see how that goes. But that is we don't often think about that. What are the rights of the people out here other than just to talk? This was the right to prepare to talk. It's kind of interesting.
Have you heard it again that challenges the whole idea? You talked about the ostensible situation where someone says, okay, or person says, okay, you got like maybe 5 of 7 elements, you're okay. People challenge that fact and see, in fact, recognize that there is a deficiency there and think they can do the same thing.
I've not seen much of that. There was one other case in your materials from this year where a planner was required to give a notice of intent to deny something. And it was a sexual oriented business. And I look at Bill because he's the planner, not because he operates. But they didn't do that. They just sent him a letter denying. And the courts overturned it and said, look, you have to follow your own rules. And that's a substantive rule, that would give the operator of the business an opportunity to appeal his decision to the town council. And so what he was deprived of was this appeal right of the initial staff determination. But the court said to say, you spend a lot of money on these UDOs, follow them. And again, somebody has to show harm, but again, so we're seeing a little bit of bill.
Committee reports, BZA.
BZA just heard several petitions over the last.
Yeah, we had several petitions on the agenda. 2 of them dropped off, 2 were continued. Those 2 are for a digital billboard being proposed along 36. That'll be heard March 21st. We had 3 special exceptions. 2 for 7 brew coffees. One's going into the Stanfield crossing, just was that east of Taco Bell, and then one at the old Schaefer's building. Bank of America drive-through going in Stanfield crossing by Taco Bell, and then the
Pair of donuts.
Pana Donuts wanted to reorient their drive-through so that the car wasn't approaching with the passenger side to the building. That was continued. They've since given me a revised plan. I haven't gone through it with Bill, but that's the plan. And then the 4 rows of parking in front setback for Harvest Landing Lot 4, which you heard today. So that's all I got.
Any other committee reports?
RDC in summary have met January 30th, February 13th. In addition to approving several invoices, we also tackled the Reagan Logistics Letter of Intent, Reagan Logistics Agreement, Resolution pledging the TIF funds for the EDC bond, as well as the Reagan Logistics Financing Agreement, and then a 100 South update.
Anything else? Anything else for the good of the order? Meeting adjourned.